All right, I think we're live, as far as I can tell anyway. So I'm going to try not to move around too much because it looks like my green screen background is playing up and looking awkward, but we'll just we'll do with the best situation. So what I thought I'd do today was run through a set of terms that are used a lot in wargaming. And the good news for you is it's not going to be my interpretation of them. It's going to be what this book says. So it'll be more accurate, which is always nice. And I'm taking them, and I thought this might be useful to have a conversation about, mainly because we get a lot of folks asking questions about, what's a ZOC? I tend to use that acronym a lot. What's the difference between a chit and a counter? Especially for new wargamers. So I thought, let's just grab one of the ancient tomes from wargaming history and see what they had to say about the terminology that they were using way back when in the 70s and the 60s. And then we can, I like the shirt there, Mitch. And notice the text is the right way around because I'm using a different camera today. So I got it all going on. And so here's this, whoa, you can't see it? There it is, the complete book of wargames. Now, be advised, don't rush out and buy it. A, it's hard to find. B, it's really not that good, right? I'm probably just committed a big sin by saying that, but it's kind of really old. Let's see when it was actually written. And then we'll get to glossary stuff. Well, 1980, so it's only 40 years old. That's all. Just 40 years. That's really old. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff in here. It's good stuff. There's stuff about medieval warfare and how to evaluate war games, playing to win. There's counters and diagrams, and I guess there's a little print and play game you can maybe make yourself in here. I have no idea. I read little bits and pieces of it. It's got all sorts of groovy pages in here and talks about all the different sort of sub-segments of the hobby and things like that. It's not really meant to be a review of this book by any means. It's got Dungeons and Dragons in here. War of the Rings, lots of SBI titles in here. Warp War from, not Alan Emmerich, what's his face? Yeah, legit. Starship, Ogre, the guy that did Ogre. Microgames, right? Metagaming microgames. GV's in here, so sci-fi stuff. Of course, Panzer Blitz and Panzer Leaders in here, Bismarck, Assault on Crete, so all sorts of different stuff, right? And so what I thought I'd do, hey everyone, look at all you guys turning up. Loving it. Exodus Soldiers, good to see you, bud. And Dev, what is up? So we got Fabrizio, dude, we have a game designer with us. All bow down. Paradise Games, nice to see you. Okay, so let's see, and Paul. Hey, by the way, Paul's one of the winners of the giveaway that we had last week, where we gave away for 2 games, a magazine, and a magazine game with the magazine. So, hang out more on my channel. You'll get free shit. It's awesome. Oops, NSFW show. There may be swearing. Okay, let's go through the glossary. And if you're a new wargamer, this will be interesting. If you're an old wargamer, might be a little tedious, but I would love, since we have some hardcore wargamers here, as we're going through this, add your thoughts and comments in the comments, and I'll pop them up on the screen here, and we'll have a chat about them. And secondarily, if you see or hear or think of any other sort of ancillary or corollary comments, then for definition that we should add, then let's make a note and we'll talk about them too. So we're just going straight back to the glossary here, which you can't see because of my stupid 3D doohickey green screen thing. So let's mute the phone because really, who wants to work today? Right. Okay, getting started. Glossary starts with A. Advance after combat. A move allowed to the victorious, in parentheses, victorious unit after a defending unit is eliminated or forced to retreat. It takes place at the end of the combat phase of a turn, not the movement phase. So cute. It does not count as part of the unit's normal per turn movement limitations. Often, when you get on Board Game Geek and you're looking at commentary on a particular game that you might be playing, you'll immediately know a new wargamer, because that is often not well defined in some wargame rules. They'll go, well, but how many movement points do I have to pay? How does that work? Particularly with games like from Simonage, right, where you can advance after combat in any direction. So that's funky just in of itself. So if you're a new wargamer, that could be like, you just blew my mind. What do you mean I'm moving, but I'm not paying for my movement? So there it is, right? So there's your first term. Attack factor. I would ask you guys these that make you give the definitions, but we'll be here all friggin' day with a delay in the video. All right, a number that signifies the comparative strength of a unit when attacking opposing units. I like that. Hex says, yeah, Jason, that's a good point, but with the lag and everything, we'd be sitting here for hours. I should make you guys do it as a quiz. Breakdown: substituting 2 or more smaller units, for example, battalions, which is there's another great live stream topic we should do. Look at formations, right? So if you're new to wargaming, but you're not a military guy, you've been over in, let's not use any disparaging names of Euro games. So if you've been over in the non-wargaming section of board gaming, you might not know, and never watched a war movie, or read a war book or a history book. You might not know what a battalion is, but nevertheless, here it is, assuming you know what a battalion is. So we're substituting in a breakdown 2 or more smaller units for 1 larger unit. Example, a regiment. And then we need to compare that to integrity. Is what it says here. Substituting 2 or more smaller units for 1 larger unit. See, I would have said that the other way around. I would have said that a breakdown is a larger unit being replaced with 2 smaller units. Isn't that what it should be? Anyway, because it would be recombining if it was 2 smaller units being replaced for a larger unit. Tony Kinner, you owe me a date and time for DAC 2, Liza. When are we playing next? Combat factor, a number that signifies the comparative strength. Did I just do this already? No, that was attack factor. A number that signifies the comparative strength of a unit when engaged in combat with opposing units, either on attack or defense. A combined attack and defense factor. Okay, got it. Combat results table, CRT. CRT, people. This is not hard, right? Let's call it a CRT. We can, there are lots of different types of CRTs. The most common and most obvious one were those that started with a 1d6, right? And they used a 1d6, and it had columns that went from started in the middle of 1 to 1, went all the way up to 6 to 1, and all the way down to 1 to 3. Because if you're attacking at 1 to 6, you're an idiot. But 1 to 3 was for desperation situations, and you basically would have one chance in 6 of doing any damage to the bad guys, and 5 chances in 6 of being a dumbass and dying. If you were attacking at 6 to 1, you probably had a really good chance of not having anything bad happen to you. And it wasn't until the mid-70s and the SBI games when, and in fact the variable combat system that came out, which I don't think was called that now, it's called the victory life system or something, but it came out and it had these different levels of results that went beyond 1d6. I think 2d6 came along, and then we had a d10, like this game here uses the d10 for results, and then there's obviously DRMs, which we'll get to in a second, and that would influence your die roll on that combat results table. So let's see what a combat results table is officially defined as. A chart or table that is used to resolve combat, usually with the aid of a die. There are 2 main types. An odds ratio CRT is divided into columns according to the ratio of the attacker's excuse me, combat factors to the defender's combat factors. A differential CRT, which we've seen several of in recent games that I've been playing for you, is divided into columns according to the numerical difference between the opposing unit's combat factors. So you might have 4 attack factors, the defender might have 2, you would have a +2 combat differential, which is another nice way of getting away from odds, which people always, get fussy about. It's easy to get fussy about because you say, hey, look, I've put 1.5 to 1. It's almost 2 to 1. Why can't I have a 1.5 to 1 column? Well, a lot of the earlier games, there weren't that. It was just 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1. So differentials give you a little more granularity in your results. So it depends on the scale and stuff like that. A less common third type, found only in tactical games, is solely based on attack factors without regard to defense. That's an interesting comment as well. So ASL, Lock and Load, Band of Brothers, even the no, I think Combat Commander does a differential. But anyway, games of that nature, OST, things like that. And notice I just used a whole bunch of acronyms there: LNL, ASL, OST, old school tactical, lock and load tactical, advanced squad leader. CRT, combat results, say we did that. Let's see, defense factor, a number that signifies the comparative strength of the unit when being attacked by opposing units. Got it. Double impulse movement. And no, it has nothing to do with a grinder or a blender that has a double impulse button. This is different. 2 movement phases, one before and one after combat. The second phase, known sometimes as mechanized movement, is usually restricted to certain motorized or armored units. And that, my friends, was somewhat of an innovation. I believe Jedco Games was one of the first games, and not saying it was the first game, but one of the first games using in the Russian campaign. It had a secondary movement option phase for mechanized units, army units. So that was I thought that was really cool when I started playing war games. Oh, I get to fight and move again, then fight. Whoa, fight again, yay! Okay, so that's double impulse movement. Dummy counters or units. And notice there's actually no definition of chit here, C-H-I-T. So there are no chits in war games. Just saying, there aren't. Okay, if you think there are chits in war games, well, you're wrong. There's not. It's not in this book. It's not used. I use the word occasionally, just to be different. So you can do that too, but just know that you will be looked at weirdly if you say chit. And that's not the S word, it's the C word. Dummy counters, fake or decoy units that are only used to deceive an opponent as to the actual dispositions of a player's forces, generally used in conjunction with inverted counters. We could talk for hours about inverted counters, couldn't we? But we won't. Facing in tactical games, the differentiation of the unit's front and rear, also sometimes its sides or flanks, also therefore the direction a unit is pointing, which will usually affect where it can move or fire. So classic examples of that, not so often with squad level war games like Panzer Leader, or it's platoon level, whatever that is, but Panzer Leader or ASL or Lock and Load Tactical or any of those. It's not necessarily facing in those games, but it's certainly just facing in man-on-man skirmish games. And there's also facing for Ancients games, which, although they're larger formations, obviously in ancient times, you had a phalanx or a legion or a cohort. It faced in a particular direction, and it was very difficult for it to wheel or flank unless they had very high experience or skill. And then you also have in the Napoleonic era, and to a certain extent in the Civil War era, which is more linear, basically all the classical combat era, so what I would call the linear combat age or the classical combat age. Everyone's going to be having a facing or a which way am I pointing my arrows and my spears? So that type of thing. Obviously, you could make squares and things back in the day, as in the ancients could do that, and the Napoleonics is obviously famous for its forming a square to prevent the charge, etc. Right, factors. Where do we get to? Facing factor, a number that signifies the comparative ability of a unit to perform certain tasks, especially of combat or movement. Also, loosely, a single point or increment of such a rating. So let's have a think about that for a second. So it's quite easy to understand, given that we've been talking about combat and defense factors, that well, yeah, Bob, good point about covered arcs and things like that for ASL. Yes, so point taken. What was I going to say? So I was going to pop that up there. That's good. Yeah, sorry about the background. I can't really change. I can change it to something different, but it's going to vibrate like this anyway. That looks like it might be my hair. That's the problem. But I just got out of the shower, so even it is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So what was I going to say about something about factors? Oh, so movement factors are obviously important, but then you might also have things like morale factors or experience factors or cohesion factors or pick anything to do with military capability, and someone will generally try and come up with some means of providing a measurement of that supply factors, logistics factors, air factors, ship gunnery factors, missile factors for ships, anti-submarine warfare that I'm dealing with right now with the Northern Lights. They have 6 factors per unit. Right, so it can get involved. Thank you, Mitchell, for being amusing. You get up on the screen. Look at your cute little icon there. All right, geomorphic. See also isomorphic. So we'll come back to that then. How about that? Hex. One hexagon in a hexagonal grid. Hexes came about apparently when a wargame designer, whoever the dude was, and I forget his name now because I'm doing this off the cuff as usual, was designed Tactics 2 using squares, and I believe Gettysburg from Avalon Hill was done with squares as well, the original one. And then he met or went on site with some chaps from Rand, saw some of their maps that they had laid out, that they were designing real war games for real military people and hypotheticals and things, and they were using a hexagonal grid, and he adopted that concept from there. I read that just the other day on the Wargamers group on Facebook. One of the things, yeah, never mind. All right, so hidden movement. Movement of units in, oh, here we go, hex side is the one I missed. One of the 6 sides of a hexagon. There you go. Hidden movement of units in such a manner that the opponent is unaware of their exact location and or composition. This may involve 2 boards, movement plots, inverted counters, and other devices. And I enjoy umpired games. And one of the things that thank you, Sir Charles Roberts, yeah, you think I would know, right? But really small brain, a lot of stuff goes in, not much stays. So thank you, Bob, once again, on point. I really enjoy umpired games. I find the unknown to be a rich experience when applied to war games. And we need to work out ways to do more of that. I've done a lot of experimenting on the YouTube channel and on the blog with trying to get viewers and readers to post opinions or answer polls or give me their input on how they would handle something. So it was kind of like an unopposed game for me. But also looking at trying to put up some scenarios that we might start with something simpler than what I've been thinking about. Start with some scenarios that are two of the same game set up, and then I'll work out some way to post about these games for each side so that they can read what's going on. but I think some of you would cheat, so I'm not sure how we'd handle that. Anyway, so that was hidden movement, indirect fire. In tactical games, a type of ranged fire that is not subject to line of sight restrictions. Line of sight is defined later on, but that may require spotting or visual observation of the target by other friendly units. So typically, that can be anything from skirmish level all the way up to sort of the battalion level. You can have this ranged indirect fire stuff going on. What was I going to say? Integrity, the ability of a unit of a certain size, for example, a brigade, to gain a bonus in movement or combat when combined or stacked into the next larger size unit, i.e. a division. And that was, where was that? Yeah, so that was talking about breakdowns. So that the reference, cross-reference there is to breakdowns. All right. Yeah, you know what, Mitchell, that's a really good point. I had tacair, and I think I have a scan of it. So I might go back and look at that. And I might try and lift some rules out of those types of games to see if I can do something with them, or umpire games for me to play with readers and viewers. And this is also an interesting one here. Task Force, though I've not played it. Fabrizio mentioned City Fight. Amazing game, and I was going to use City Fight as my sort of way of engaging in the hidden movement system to play a game with you guys, and sort of update it to be sort of centered in and around Fallujah, with trying to set up an FOB, a forward operating base, and have that base be attacked and all that sort of fun stuff. So City Fight might still be an option. All right, let's carry on here. We have just another 15 of these things, so we'll just keep going here. Yeah, Flat Top, what a great game, right? I've played that umpired, and that is just a freaking. Do we play it umpired? No, we didn't. We just played it opposed, and we all had our plots and stuff like that. It was a disaster. It was guys moving units too far, not far enough, and sending the wrong aircraft out at the wrong altitude. It was just a nightmare. Inverted counters initially placed or moved upside down to conceal their identity, yada, yada, yada. Okay, isomorphic. Modular game boards that can be, let me just stop it back up from happening. Okay. Modular game boards that can be placed next to each other in varying orders and attitudes to alter the composition of the playing surface from scenario to scenario, or in air, sea, and space games, to allow an effectively unlimited playing area generally found only in tactical games, also known as geomorphic boards. So obviously geomorphic stuff is very, very popular because it expands your playability, but takes away from the historical, I guess, the historical fidelity of the given scenario you're playing in, say, ASL or Lock and Load. And I know they both can have historical maps and stuff, but basically geomorphics are giving you a representation of, you know, a relative situation. It's going to be an approximation of what was going on, and it's not necessarily going to be 100% historical accurate. But then again, 99% of all the scenarios at the tactical squad level are not historically accurate. So they're structured for balance. Line of sight. In tactical games, a line of sight between two units or locations that determines whether one unit can see and hence attack a distant opposing unit. Varying terrain features such as woods or mountains may block a line of sight. Now, we're coming to the end of L, and it's one thing that's not in here, in L, in the complete book of war games. And welcome to all the folks. Hey, Tom, it's good to see you, man. I just saw that you checked in. And let me see who else. And Jose, here we go. We have a war gamer from Brazil. You gotta love that. I wish I'd met you when I was down in Brazil several years ago. We could have tried to play a game with my horrible Portuguese and your English and Portuguese. So let's see, line of sight. So at the end of that, that's the end of the L's. Here's one thing that's not in this glossary because I think it's a relatively new term relative to this book, right? This book's 40 years old. So what was I going to say? Line of communication. So line of communication is used often, and I've noticed an increased usage of line of communication, or a LOC, L-O-C, that is used to define general supply. It might be used to allow reinforcements to be moved into or off of a board area. Line communication might actually mean with the ability to communicate between geographic areas on the map and things of that nature. So it can be interesting. Mitchell Land, I don't understand what you're saying. So clarify yourself. Funny guy, you're supposed to be working today, Mitchell. All right, what do we got? Where do you get? So L. So that was a line of communication. If someone else has a better definition of line of communication, I'd love to hear it. Maybe you can pull the rule book out and tell me what it says, and we'll kind of go in it from there. Crunch. I need to find a desk that's actually high enough for me to be comfortable. I've yet to find one. Let's see, line of sight, mechanized movement, a bonus given certain units, i.e. armor, most commonly a second movement phase after combat for those units only, the second half of a double impulse movement. So there's multiple definitions there. All right, okay. Morale, the ability of units to remain in combat and or follow orders until they're eliminated as opposed to fleeing or becoming demoralized. Also, a rating or factor connected with such an ability. This is not the same as command control, which, by the way, I may have skipped this one, command and control. Command control, the ability or inability to make units do what their leaders, i.e. you, the player, wish. Command control rules usually involve ways to prevent certain, often randomly selected units from following orders. So that's a whole topic in of itself, right? Command and control rules and definitions of those rules and the way that command and control is manifested in a wide range of scales, from the skirmish, tactical, grand tactical, operational, and grand operational type of scale, all the way up to strategic level. There's all sorts of different ways that command and control can manifest itself and present itself in a game, whether it's being within a certain number of hexes of a leader or an HQ, or whether it's physically sending messages down through a number of hexes to a set of counters, so they tell them what to do, and then there might be a chance that they do or don't follow those orders. So all sorts of things like that. Let's see. So that was an interesting one that I missed. Sorry about that. Movement factor, I think it's pretty obvious, but a number that signifies the distance a unit can move. Loosely, the number of hexes a unit can move in a turn. That's pretty interesting, Fabrizio. I didn't know that. So movement plots, a written set of orders that includes the exact hex-to-hex path. So if we were playing CV or where is that game? My goodness, flat top, then we would be doing movement plots like that. That also can happen in the original Sniper. You had to plot your movement, and everything was done simultaneously, and you would reveal it. So that's always a nifty little mechanism. Very difficult to do playing solo, right? It kind of makes life hard. Order of operational, a game scale that is between tactical and strategic, a game whose units are battalions, regiments, brigades, and or divisions. So it's pretty broad spectrum, and a myriad of different systems that can be applied to that type of gameplay, right? find that a lot of the games that I enjoy the most are games that are in that operational sort of segment or scale. That I find that to be pretty interesting. All right, order battle. Yes, order battle. A list of forces by organization and type that are actually presented at a battle, present at a battle, or the units that are in a given scenario. In fact, I just wrote a post this morning. I was trying to work out what the 7th Polish Marine Division had in it, and while I knew what the individual brigades or the individual brigades were, I didn't know what the sort of composition of those units was, and I was fascinated to try and find that out. So we can talk about that some other time. Overruns, an overwhelming attack that is made on a unit in the same hex, not an adjacent one, often in the movement phase. This is sometimes allowed only in the attack, allowed only if the attack is so strong that it cannot fail. So back in the early days, we used to be 10 to 1 or better, or 8 to 1 or better, and you didn't even roll a die. You just had the factors, and you moved the unit through the hex, and the guys in the hex got blown away, and you either kept moving or moved one more hex or moved into the hex, and on you went. Others made you roll for it because there was still a chance that things would go horribly wrong. Now, obviously, one of my favorite systems, the OCS system, has an overrun mechanic in it, and you're still rolling on the combat results table for that, and things can get hairy in that sort of situation, but we'll talk about that some other time. Plots. So anything else we should be talking about that starts with O, that's a relevant topic or content, or M that is not in this 40-year-old book? Let me know in the comments below. Let's see here. Plot. A written set of orders, so very similar to a movement plot, a written set of orders concerning the movement or attacks of a unit for the current turn, used with simultaneous movement and things of that nature. And here's an interesting topic. It's kind of a little random definition, but or term. Power politics refers to multiplayer games whose concerns are as much political, negotiations, alliance, and so on, and or economic as strictly military. For example, you guessed it, diplomacy. So the game that we all play to lose our friends, although I never lost a friend over it. I did get kind of hurt on a regular occasion playing diplomacy, but I did not lose any friends. It's not because they didn't have enough to get pissed off with them to actually not play with them anymore, but anyway. So I think another great game like that is obviously Empire in Arms. Wow, the screen's really jaggy. It's annoying the crap out of me. I hope it's not too bad for you guys. Ranged fire. In tactical games, an attack that is made from a distance by archers or artillery or infantry rifles and so on, a non-adjacent attack in essence. Pretty self-explanatory. RPG, role-playing game. And that's all it has to say about that. RPG, it's a role-playing game. You pretend to be somebody, you're not. Scenario, one of a set of situations complete with its own unit listings, i.e. order of battle, victory conditions, and sometimes special rules that is nonetheless a part of a larger game, in effect, a mini game, sharing a board, pieces, and rules with other mini games. That's a pretty torturous explanation of what a scenario is, but I like it. Let's see. Scenario, sequence of play, the exact order in which things take place during a game turn. A sequence of play can be very important in most games, and there are a lot of games that don't do a good job of defining the sequence of play well and the steps that go into that sequence of play. So incumbent upon the game designer to make sure they have more detail than less in sequences of play, particularly for new wargames. Encourage them to do that. Sign move, simultaneous movement. Probably not going to get into defining this one. I think it's self-evident, and B, so rare these days that you probably won't come across it unless you're a sucker for pain. Spotting, the act of a unit seeing an opposing unit, often so that a third unit may fire at the opposing unit. See line of sight and ranged fire and indirect fire. All right, fair enough. Spotting's a mechanic, right? Stacking, place more than one unit, usually on the same side, in a hex. There are usually limitations on this, and in many games it is prohibited to stack. I think that's the truth. And that's where unit scale and hex scale matter. And there are many games, or some, I should say, that that always break, can always break a game. So if you look at, well, we probably shouldn't name names, but there are some grand operational games that might have, say, a 5 or a 10-mile hex size, and they'll have divisions, but then they might also have battalions, and some of those battalions might not be able to influence that. A battalion can't really influence 5 miles of terrain. So there's all sorts of nuance that goes in there, and then sometimes you'll have unusual situations where you have a very small scale, 200 or 300 meters or 200 or 300 yards, and you'll have battalion scale or regiment scale units running around doing their thing. But combined with the time scale of an hour turn versus a 20-minute turn, silly things can happen. You can run right past the bad guys and not get shot at. That's kind of weird. So there's all sorts of things that can happen without trying to explain every single circumstance. So I find time, ground scale, and unit scale to be very important in the structure of a game for it to be believable and immersive. All right. Spotting, stacking, strategic, a game that is characterized by large distances and broad concerns, a game whose units are divisions or armies or the equivalent. The extreme case is called grand strategic. I think we might all know who those are. The older ones would be Advanced Third Reich, the granddaddy of all the grand strategic games, and the Supreme Commander, and Die Senso, and Total of Krieg, World of War, and World in Flames, and all those sorts of things. War in Europe, you might want to call that a grand strategic game, but it doesn't really have politics and economics in it very much. So those types of things are would be considered strategic games. Supply, considerations of ammunition, food, fuel, and so on. Usually separated, treated abstractly, unless you're playing the operational combat system. Unsupplied units are usually restricted in their activities, i.e. their movement, their ability to fight, things of that nature. Tactical, a game scale that is characterized by small units. Yeah, I know you bought it as a kid. I only picked this up like 10 years ago. When I was living in Australia, we didn't have any of these books or anything. An SBI magazine game turned up on the rack at the toy store, and I was like, "Mom, I need $4." Except I said it on the screen. Oh. A game scale is characterized, what was I talking about? Tactical. A game scale is characterized by small units, battalions or smaller. Interesting, because I would have said that would be an operational level game, and this does not have yeah, here it is. Yeah, this is where even their own definitions kind of cross over, because in operational it says battalion as well. So now in tactical it's saying battalion. So we call that grand tactical, right? Is when you've got battalions and things like that, depending on the era, I would call it grand tactical, generally speaking. Usually ranged fire, sorry, I couldn't cut that off, didn't I? A game scale that is characterized by small units, battalions are smaller, and usually ranged fire. The two extremes are called close tactical. Never heard that before. Involving individual men or vehicles, we would call that skirmish today. And grand tactical. Look, I should just shut my face and read the definition. Large battles fought on this scale or those with relatively large units. Terrain, the natural or man-made features of a hex. So there's your land for you, Mitchell. Uh, indicated by its color or coding, for example, rivers, woods, sea, mountains, and also the effects of such features on movement and combat. Terrain effects chart, the TEC, the TEC. Nothing wrong with saying that, TEC. Go into the TEC chart. Go into the TEM chart, the terrain effects on movement, the terrain effects on combat. Terrain effects chart. So it can be both, either terrain effects chart or terrain effects on combat. A chart that explains the effects of terrain and movement and combat on the units involved. Untried units, see, SBI centric. Bet you this guy who wrote this book is the SBI guy. Who wrote this book? I don't even know. Who wrote this book? John Freeman. There we go. I guess he's an SBI guy. Untried units, because I don't know many games that had untried units back in the day, except for SBI. I don't know any Avalon Hill games that had that. But who knows? I am by no means. I have a 20-year. Whoa, look at that. Where are my hands? I have a 20-year gulf of playing up until my first or second year, maybe my second year of college, and then I stopped wargaming altogether until about 11 years ago. Oh, that's pretty cool. Now, I have not seen Peter Bell's book, so I'll have to check that out. Untried units. I did that, didn't I? Units whose actual combat strength is unknown to either player until they take part in their first battle, at which point their true combat factors on the underside of the counter are revealed. La-di-da, how about that? And last but not least, zone of control, or ZOC, or EZOC. A unit's sphere of influence, usually the hex it is in and the 6 adjacent hexes that affect opposing units. Effects may vary, but usually involve combat, movement, and or supply. And that's one of the wonderful things about ZOCs and how they're applied. They can have a huge range of influences and differences depending on the scale of the game system, the game period. So it can be anything from there is no zone of control to there is a ZOC to there's only a ZOC in certain circumstances. There's a ZOC for certain types of units. Some units can ignore ZOCs, others can't ignore ZOCs. So I find ZOCs to be a critical part of the gameplay, and how they're applied really can change the way a game is played or a game is experienced. Yeah. So, all right. So I'm actually going to do a couple of these videos, and this particular video is just using the complete book of Wargames by John Freeman to help you new wargamers or older wargamers who, I don't know, who want a refresher or whatever, learn a little bit more about wargaming and things of that nature. The next video I'm going to go over some of the different game systems, what they are, what's unique or different about them, and I'm going to talk about some of the game companies, what companies are around. So if you're a game publisher and you happen to see and I've tolerated the last 43 minutes and 58 seconds of this video and you're still here, I encourage you to drop me a note in the comments or drop me a note by email at bigboardgaming@gmail.com. And let me know about the fact that A, you're a publisher, B, you have a publishing, what's the right word for it? You have a publishing company per se, but just let me know that you have a mast, right? You have a place to hang your hat and you're publishing, and I'll make sure you get included in the video. But in the meantime, if there's not other questions, I'm probably going to wrap it up. Folks have, here we go. Yeah, and that was also an SBI game. The Panzer Group was an SBI game, Jeff. So unless folks have questions or comments, I'd love to get going, and I'll go do my thing, and you go do your thing. Go roll some dice, right? Let's get that going, and we'll talk to everybody real soon. Just a quick little chat. There goes my water. Thankfully, that wasn't over a board game. All right, talk to you soon. Cheers. Where is the button? There it is. Adios.